Welcome to Regent Park TV. I'm Jabin. Today we're bringing you a closer look at the March 2025 Toronto City Council meeting, where important measures were adopted to address pressures on the city's refugee and emergency shelter system. These decisions follow an investigation by Toronto's Ombudsman, which revealed significant issues with the city's exclusion of refugee claimants from the shelter system in 2022. The Ombudsman's report revealed that the city's decision lacked proper documentation and was inconsistent with city policies, resulting in harmful referrals to federal services that didn't provide adequate shelter. The investigation also highlighted systemic discrimination, particularly impacting Black and African refugee claimants. The Ombudsman report issued 14 recommendations to improve processes, ensure accountability, and strengthen human rights policies. The Ombudsman was present at the Council meeting, responding to questions from Council members about these findings and recommendations. In response, Mayor Olivia Chow presented a motion urging the federal government to reverse the decision to end the Interim Housing Assistance Program and to restore settlement program funding. Stay tuned as Regent Park TV continues to cover these important discussions.
I want to say that I'm pleased that Council again is considering how it best supports refugee claimants seeking shelter in Toronto. This indicates to me that councillors have listened to the community's calls for action that follow the release of my report. As you may recall, the city manager did not accept my findings at the time and chose not to implement my recommendations unless directed to do so by Council. After I asked Council to direct the public service to implement my recommendations, it voted instead to receive the report without debate. So it's great news that this report has come back on the Council agenda. Also on the agenda is a briefing note from Toronto Shelter and Support Services that lists the actions it has taken and plans to take to address my report's 14 recommendations. The actions listed in the briefing note are a good first start, but I believe that the city needs to do more. The comments I'm making today will help the public service improve the fairness of services it offers to people of Toronto. I've submitted to Council a letter that addresses some of my concerns with the briefing note, and the letter is attached to the agenda. In my investigation report, I found that the city's decision to stop allowing refugee claimants access to the base shelter system went against the Ontario Human Rights Code and important city policies. And that's why I recommended that the city ensure all future changes to shelter eligibility for refugee claimants adhere to relevant law and policy, including the Ontario Human Rights Code and the city's human rights and anti-harassment and discrimination policy. The division's briefing note makes no commitment to do this. I also found in my report that the city did not follow a clear, well-documented decision-making process in making the eligibility change. I'm concerned that the division's briefing note makes no mention of any plans to develop a formal, transparent process for making changes to shelter eligibility. I also recommended in my report that the city develop a framework to analyze any proposed changes to shelter eligibility to ensure that they are consistent with the Toronto Housing Charter. The division's briefing note does not directly address this recommendation. Finally, with all my investigations, Ombudsman staff monitor the implementation of my recommendations. And this work can take hundreds of hours of thoughtful collaboration. I cannot stress the importance of the office's oversight in making sure my recommendations are effective. Unfortunately, this oversight is missing in this case because the city did not accept my recommendations. In closing, I want to say that I am proud of the report and stand by all my findings. I believe Council should adopt the report and direct staff to implement its recommendations. I believe that is the only way for the city to earn the public's trust on this matter and ensure it is a fairly supporting refugee claimants seeking shelter in Toronto. Madam Speaker, those are my comments. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Matt Lowe, question.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker, to the Ombudsman. I inferred from the response from the city there was some concern that your report in some way made accusations of anti-Black racism toward staff. I'd like you to have an opportunity to clarify whether or not you report allegations against staff, or were you making allegations of systemic racism rather than.
Through you, Madam Speaker, Councillor, our investigation determined that the city knew that most of the refugee claimants accessing or trying to access the shelter system at that time came from Africa and were Black. So the decision to change the eligibility criteria really was directed at non-Canadians, and it also disproportionately affected Black individuals that for some had previously had opportunity to access city programs. And so on the basis of citizenship and race, we determined that this decision was systemic, was an example of systemic discrimination. The finding in no way made any comment about the conduct of individuals. It was really about the decision that was taken and the impact that.
Councillor Burnside.
So based on that, when you found that there was systemic racism, are you saying that's on the part of the city or the federal government?
Through the Speaker, our investigation found that the city was denying people based on their immigration status. They were asking these questions and not explaining clearly the rationale for these questions. As you've heard from the General Manager and from the Executive Director of SDF&A, there are certain programs that require this information, but that wasn't explained to the people that were being asked.
Would that have changed things?
Pardon?
Would that have changed the
Well,
outcome?
at least they would have understood why they were being asked, and they would have been prepared to bring that information forward.
So back to my question, sorry, not to be argumentative, but would that have changed the outcome? We're talking about outcomes here, right? Would that have changed the outcome if they had have?
Through the Speaker, we've always said that the decision to change the eligibility criteria based on citizenship and race in this particular case was wrong. And what we have suggested is that if the city is going to make decisions about eligibility, that they do so and ensure that they're doing so, they're meeting the requirements of the Ontario Human Rights Code. That's basically what it comes down to.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Through you, Speaker. Mr. Ombudsman, you have a letter that's dated the 25th of March. How does that letter help us with respect to addressing the recommendations? Are you adding additional updates to your recommendations through this letter?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, no, we're not adding additional recommendations. In the letter, I was attempting to inform Council about our review of the information that was provided.
So clarification.
Exactly.
That's the intention.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Now, with respect to whatever decision is made here today, is it your position, and it is prior, was it your position that the Ombudsman's office should have a role to play with respect to ensuring that the work that staff will do, because I understand a motion is coming to adopt your recommendations, that you will also be part of this monitoring process? And is that a standard practice, or is this something that would be new and unique?
Through the Speaker, in answer to your question, Councillor, monitoring is always an aspect of our work, particularly when we conduct an investigation such as this. It allows us to ensure that the recommendation implementation presented or provided by the city is on track, that we're satisfied with the progress that's been made, to help to avoid unnecessary delays, and really to ensure that the recommendations are implemented to our satisfaction.
So can I then ask you, Toronto is a sanctuary city. We've approved that. You have reached certain recommendations and decision-making through your fact-finding, systemic discrimination as part of your determination. You don't need a human rights description of systemic discrimination to help you to understand what your finding, the findings from your office have found as part of your investigation. Would that be correct?
Through the Speaker, Councillor, I don't believe that our office needs to be a human rights investigation body to be able to make that determination. We can look at the evidence that is before us, and in this case, we found that the decision disproportionately affected individuals who were Black and who were non-Canadian citizens. That's how we arrived at that decision.
So as an accountability office, you are doing your fact-finding investigations and you report where the facts take you. Is that correct?
Through the Speaker, we based our findings and our recommendations on the evidence. And so we believe that the evidence backs up our findings.
Right. Now, a question was asked about Ukrainians and Blacks and so on and so forth. And you have indicated that funding, and that's been stated, that were available for one group wasn't available for the other, so you weren't comparing them. The comparison is unnecessary dealing with the facts that you found as part of your investigation. Is that correct?
That was your last question?
Yes, thank you, Speaker.
Through the Speaker, our investigation was focused on the decision of the city that they made to change the eligibility criteria. That was what our investigation was based on, not on the Ukrainian refugee situation.
Mayor Chow to speak.
I'm moving 4 recommendations that deals with funding from the federal government. Let me give you a number that you need to know. In 2021, here in Toronto, we had 530 refugees, claimants. Today, we have 4,597 refugees claimant in our shelter. Think about it. 4,597, a dramatic increase from 530. So what happened in 2023? This is before I became the mayor. I saw people living on the street. I saw people in front of Peter Street. Things were desperate. The housing benefits, better known as COP, ran out. There was no federal funding because in 2023, apparently IHAB, which is the program that is called Interim Housing Assistance Program. I don't know why it's interim because we know we have refugees arriving. It was interim, so it stopped. So things were totally desperate. I came in at the time that where people were on the street. So what did we do since then? We provided close to $5 million to Black-led churches to support their work. We have extra 257 space for Red Cross to step in to help us. 8 refugees' houses to support them. We have provided 3,000 plus refugee spots now. We are putting 300, we are taking 300 refugees, a lot of them refugees, most of them are refugees, on housing benefits so that they can move from shelter into their own homes. That's through the housing benefits. We put our own money in. That was the first council meeting I came here, and all of you trusted, and we knew the situation was terrible. We put aside $7 million on a federal and provincial program. We put in a city money to help out on the rent supplement. And that began all the work we have been doing. It was hard work. We said we need a reception center. And we kept saying we need a reception center. 2 years later, we finally got a reception center at Peel. And we're now negotiating some beds from them. And finally, in 2023, end of 2023 and 2024, and this year, we finally received $261 million from the federal government. They paid their bills, 95% of their bills. But here's the problem. I'm about to run out of time. I just hope I can have let me tell you the problem. It's a serious problem. because the interim housing assistance program that gave us $259 million about to run out. They're winding it down because it's interim, don't you know? And that, how are they winding it down? They're winding it down for this year. We have, we will have 95% next year, 75% the year after, 50% the year after. In 2027, none. Program finished. 95 to 75% to 50%. Why? Oh, maybe because the refugees will stop coming to Toronto. Seriously, you think refugees will stop coming to Toronto? Look at what's happening in Sudan today. Look at the number of people that have died. The other problem that they have come up with last December of 2024, they came up with a definition of what we can receive funding for. So if a refugee claimant arrived to Pearson, they then get, hopefully, housed by us, or by Red Cross, or by IHAB, or ICC, the refugees unit. And then what happens to them? Then they file a claim later on. But it takes them 6 months or so to get their, get the paperwork and find a lawyer to submit the refugees' claims. During this 6 months, we do not get any funding. So we just house them. Well, then maybe they're not refugees claimants. Well, they're not quite refugees claimant yet, according to the federal government. But guess what? They are homeless. They need a shelter. So we have to house them. We won't get any funding. So it's a serious problem. Those 4 recommendations in front of you is what will face us, and I hope I get everyone's support on it. And yes, there's a federal election going on, and I hope that every party that are running take this refugees housing settlement services seriously. Because you know why? Victoria and Job are now, after 6 or 7 months, are working. They are contributing. They're doing amazing stuff. I went back to visit them. And just refugees need a bit of helping hand, and Canada have always been able to do that. Let's continue that tradition.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, questions?
Thank you very much, Speaker, through you to the Mayor. Mayor, thank you so much for your motions. I'm wondering if there's anything further you think we can do as a council and the citizens of Toronto, as you've expressed, as a federal election that's going on. There are many candidates who are actually vying for with the particular positions and so on that are available. Do you have some advice for us in terms of additional work that could be done to help you with respect to this process?
Thank you for that question. Absolutely. Because the Canada-Ontario housing benefits, every March, the federal and the provincial government negotiate again. And then while they're negotiating, there's a gap. So it's last year, it stopped for 6 months. We couldn't move people from shelter into housing because it stopped. Make this permanent. Rent supplement really helps. And I tell you, these refugees claimants, once they start working, they pay back or they establish themselves, they no longer need the housing benefits. They no longer need shelter. We need to see it as, in Toronto, a place where we open our arms to Irish refugees in the, in the 1830s, 50s. So during that period, right, we were able to house people. Let's do the same now. And we can talk to our, whichever party is, that comes to our door, talk to the candidates to say, traditionally we do very good work. It's not a big amount of money. And it's a short period of time. It's just municipalities alone. It's not just City of Toronto, let me tell you. Across Canada, from coast to coast, every mayor that I meet, small town, big city, they're saying, we need help.
Additionally, this particular situation that we're in here today, discussing the Ombudsman's report, has been rather divisive and has been very problematic for us as a city and so on. What advice as mayor would you offer to us? Because I understand that their motions are coming forward. Some will make this report better than perhaps it was initially. What do you want Torontonians to take away from this process and understanding the city's ability as a sanctuary city to help those who are in need of help, no matter where they come from?
Torontonians, Canadians are very generous. And we've demonstrated it over and over again. We care for each other. And we understand the plights of refugees. Refugees have different needs than folks that are homeless, that have other needs. There needs to be a policy, and we have it. We've developed it, where we house refugees in a certain way because they need legal help, they need any number of help, right? Whereas people that are homeless have other support that they need. So shelter is not the only thing.
Right.
Comprehensive approach so they can get back up on their feet faster. In the case of Job, he had counseling support. He had ways to, so that he found out how to start his own business. He's very ambitious. He's very talented. So we need those kind of support. He did not need drug addiction, for example, that some other homeless folks, because he's different challenges. So we need to house people, but also consider who they are, what kind of support they need. We need to work with community agencies, whether it's Black-led churches, appropriate community agencies. There are a lot of them, Sojourn House, Matthews House, Romario House. They have done so much work with successive wave of refugees. Work with those agencies, and we can make a big difference. The boat people, for example, we brought in 200,000 boat people during that period, and every one of them were housed and were able to find a way because of Friendship Family, different kind of programs, whether they're from Ukraine, whether they're from Sudan, whether they are from Uganda, because they come because of their sexual orientation. We can house them. We can support them. Let's do that together.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please follow us on all our social medias, and for more information, please visit our website.